Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. Our planet can only produce a finite number of resources from food to water and can only withstand a certain degree of greenhouse gas emissions in order to stay healthy. Experts warn that the biggest driver of environmental degradation is the fact that we are consuming resources at an unsustainable rate, and therefore our production of goods is increasing. Much of the planet's economic growth has been achieved as a result of overexploiting resources such as fossil fuels. But as the world's resources are coming under increased pressure, so the constraints to growth are becoming increasingly visible. So what do we have? That's our focus today on the program. Do stay with us. Deep in a forest in Nigeria's Ebute-Kpare village, Egbon-Toluwa Marigi sized up a tall mahogany tree, methodically cut it down with his axe and machete. And as it fell with a crackling sound, he surveyed the forest for the next tree. Around him, the stumps dotting the swampy forest were a reminder of trees that once stood tall but are fast disappearing to illegal logging in Ondo State, southwest Nigeria.
Before, this logging business was different. We could cut down over 15 trees in one location. But now, if we manage to find 2 trees, it's a blessing to us.
From 2001 to 2021, Nigeria lost 1.14 million hectares of tree cover, equivalent to 11% decrease in tree cover since 2000, and equal to 587 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That's according to Global Forest Watch, a platform that provides data and monitors forests. Cutting down trees for logging, opening up farmland, or to feed energy demand for a growing population is putting pressure on Nigeria's natural forests. President Muhammadu Buhari told a COP15 meeting in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, that Nigeria had established a National Forestry Trust Fund to help regenerate the country's forests. That may not be enough, as the country loses forests at a faster pace.
Minimum of 300 million trees a year are being cut or are being lost every year in this country. So we have to plant 300 million trees per year in order to stand still. And we have been cutting this number of trees for so many years. So this will give you an idea of the enormity of the tasks that is ahead.
This is something another logger, Oluwakomiyo, knows all too well, especially as he complains about the limited number of trees available to be cut down. But his priority is to eke out a living. As he heads to the forest with his family and dog, he says there are now too many loggers all jostling for fewer trees.
I cut 3 trees only. It is not enough for me. If I cut up to 10, 20 or 30, or even more than that, then it will be enough for me. The people cutting trees now are more than the available trees, and it was not like this in the time of our forefathers.
Months after cutting the trees, to pull the logs together and fasten them into rafts, he has a collection of more than 40 logs. With other loggers, they have to put together money to hire a tugboat to pull the rafts through creeks and rivers from Ondo State to Lagos. Makeshift shelters on the rafts are made from wood and help shield Egbon-Toluwa and his friends from the weather. Food is shared while they belt out local folk songs to lift spirits. The logs will be transported via creeks and rivers all the way to Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos.
Logging has helped me be a good citizen. If not, I would have been carrying charms and terrorizing everyone. So doing this business has helped me become a good citizen.
The boat stops at several locations to pick up more loggers and their rafts. A single boat can carry up to 1,000 rafts, each containing as much as 30 logs. Egbotoluwa's journey ends at a lagoon in Lagos, where rafts from Ondo State and other parts of the country converge, and the logs are processed at sawmills and sold to different users. While logging does provide temporary relief from poverty once loggers cut down the trees, it takes years for them to grow back. As forests are destroyed, poor people often lose access to the forest goods and services they depend on. And because deforestation contributes to the emissions that cause climate change, forest destruction impacts the development prospect of poor countries as well. Halting the loss and degradation of forest ecosystems and promoting their restoration have the potential to contribute over 1/3 of the total climate change mitigation that scientists say is required by 2030 to meet the objectives of the Paris Agreement. As the world debates how to operationalize the Paris Agreement, experts say it is imperative that national leaders accelerate these actions.
Then it makes sense to really lean in.
During his recent visit to Nigeria, United Nations high-level champion for COP26, Nigel Toppin said there is a need to think more about the nexus between climate change and development.
And the need to invest not just in emissions reductions, but in a continent which has hardly any emissions, it's much more about how do we drive development and invest in development that doesn't build an emissions problem, but that also addresses some of the resilience challenges that communities in Africa are already facing today. So that's been the biggest learning and where a lot of the challenges are. I mean, I think the biggest wins have been that we have unbelievable momentum now from the private sector. We launched the Race to Zero, this campaign to get everyone to commit to zero and have plans in place for what they can do this decade. We now have over 10,000 businesses, cities, universities, investors, banks, all on that journey at different paces and different levels of sophistication. But we've kind of passed the point where it's a question of are we going to do it or not? It's a question of how do we do it and how do we do it quickly? Because the cost of inaction is growing. And I think the other exciting thing for me is that the private sector and increasingly governments are now seeing that that the economy that we're building by building a zero carbon resilient future is a bigger, less fragile, and if we get it right, more fair economy, and therefore it's a competitive advantage.
Unchecked, climate change will push up to 130 million people into poverty over the next 10 years, unraveling hard-won development gains, and could cause over 200 million people to migrate within their own countries by 2050. According to the dirty footprint of the broken grid, a 2019 study from the International Finance Corporation, Nigeria has one of the largest fleets of petrol and diesel generators globally, with 3 million generators, or one for every 60 people. These generators, no doubt, contribute to environmental pollution and other hazards. There are, however, no known reliable estimate for the number of kerosene lanterns belching smoke into the atmosphere every night, nor the number of candles burnt every night in search of a flickering light. This energy situation in the country, it is believed, both poses a challenge and provides an opportunity.
One of the things we've been looking at in particular is how much finance needs to flow in order to drive this transition. And I understand from the Energy Transitions Plan that figure for Nigeria is about 1.9 trillion between now and 2060. And actually we know for the entire emerging market and developing markets, excluding China, which is a big special case, we need about 2 trillion extra a year by 2030. And about 70 to 80% of that will have to come from the private sector. There's just not enough public finance to solve that, either in the north or the south. Right? So I think Nigeria's been doing a lot of the really important foundational things, setting that long-term target, passing a climate change act which puts that into law. I think that now we need to see the establishment of the council, which will be really, really important. And as you move into a new presidency, a set of signals of policy direction and policy transformation, which makes international private capital wake up and say, oh, something special is happening in Nigeria, we want to come there and be part of investing that. And you have an incredibly dynamic local private sector, but they're going to need to partner with international. And so there are some challenges right around currency control, around the extent to which the way that cash is managed with the banking system, and some policies which have not been consistent, where things have been approved but not implemented. Those worry international investors. So I think that there's a real opportunity to build on the NDC, get the council right, and get some of those building blocks of policy in place, and get the first big projects that are part of that 1.9 trillion over the line, hopefully as quickly as possible, because there's nothing like success to build confidence.
In the wake of failed international climate treaty-making efforts, from Kyoto to Copenhagen, climate governance scholars and practitioners are investing their effort and hopes in the potential of non-state climate actions. To close this gap between the greenhouse gas emissions reduction commitments made by government and the Paris Agreement well below 2 degrees Celsius target, it is believed that substantial work by additional national, subnational, and non-state actions is required, and many have advocated for religious organizations to join the League.
The sustainable solutions that will emerge from our conversations today.
This was the focus of a gathering by the Ecology Working Group of the Catholic Archdiocese of Lagos, a day conference with the theme Journeying and Listening Together, Energy Crisis and Sustainable Lifestyle for the Church and State. Look at the Church's response to the call by Pope Francis 7 years ago when he released his encyclical Laudato Si, translated to Care for Our Home. The document centered on the care for the earth, our common home, environmental pollution challenges, and the persistent poverty facing the world.
We are also faced with the results of our collective and individual lifestyles and habits. Lifestyle and habits that lead to a depletion of species of animals and plants, the pollution of the earth, turning it into what Pope Francis calls a pile of filth. All of the above that I've mentioned have more impacts on us, not only as individuals, but also as interconnected people of the world, such that we cannot but hear and feel the cry of the extremely poor, who are forced many times to migrate because their land cannot sustain them anymore, or sometimes because of conflicts that arise from the effects of climate change on their environments. The pollution of their environments, which results in lack of potable water, loss of income, and resultant susceptibility to diseases, have made the cry of the poor louder and more widespread, with the attendant ill health that arise from diseases.
The Lagos State Commissioner for Health, who was the guest speaker, said the energy crisis around the world has led to a concern that the world's demands on the limited natural resources that are used to power industrial society are diminishing as the demand rises.
And every one of us must contribute and play our role in reducing our toxicity of the environment. So the solutions are for us to go green, to use alternative modalities of transportation and energy, to conserve energy, to reduce waste, and to dispose of our waste appropriately. So we have a choice. There are only two options. We can either do nothing and watch our planet disintegrate, or as we are gathered here today, and thankfully the church is taking a significant lead, and other spiritual houses and religious entities are beginning to recognize that everybody's voice and everybody's hand need to be on deck. We need to drive sustainable environmental projects. We need to reverse the effects of greenhouse emission. We need to plant more trees and reverse the deforestation. And we need to be focused on restoration.
Lagos State government says it is committed to improving air quality, and that should Lagos achieve the targets set by the World Health Organization, it could prevent 2,800 deaths and 155,000 hospitalizations, reduce 2,300 asthma incidences, and save up to $2.3 billion annually. The government understands that these challenges can only be solved when all community leaders engage in the process.
We quite understand that Lagosians are busy in survival mode, and that these kinds of messages may not be prioritized in their understanding. But as government, we have to keep on. You know, the more we message, the more awareness, and of course, we have to lead by example. So when we build, we have to build low-carbon buildings. We have to put mass transit transportation systems in place, movement in buses, in trains, on water. We have to make sure that the vehicles that we have in Lagos are fuel efficient. We need to transit to electric vehicles. We need to talk about planting trees, and we need to talk about environmental protection. You know, we need to talk about disease surveillance and educating our children in school to make sure that they understand these fundamental principles. And that we as Lagos State right now are handing over something to the next generation that's not broken.
The Ecology Working Group of the Catholic Archdiocese of Lagos says in an increasing interconnected world, the discernment of choices between us to collectively discover how we can reconstruct a new world built on holistic co-belonging must be done collectively with scientists, theologians, politicians and people at the fringes working together.
Most churches are regenerating. They are reconstructing and they're taking an inward look. Say, how do we survive this? And how do we live into the future? So a lot of renewable energy is coming into place. A lot of change in construction pattern. You heard what Prof said today, was happy with this hall, cross ventilation, bay windows and stuff. That's going on in all our churches now. The Archbishop has given that directive. Tree planting is very important. You cannot build only concrete, whatever, again, in the Archdiocese. You must have green space. The Pope calls it contemplative love gardens. Even if it is just 2 trees, 3 trees, and a little bench, you must have it in every parish so that, you know, there are carbon sinks and they are a place for contemplation. If you look back, the saints of them days, they were so spiritual in that it was by going into commune with nature that they were able to do some of the things that they did. So the Pope wants to recreate that to say, let's have more harmony, let's have more whatever. So the church in Nigeria is also going to do this. The Conference of Catholic Bishops of Nigeria also will key into this, as Archbishop of Lagos is doing. Like solar energy. Our church has gone solar. The monastery has gone solar. Many other churches are going solar. Inverters are being used. And then we are now saying that for lifestyle changes, you will switch off, not only switch off your computers and your whatever, your light sources, you must unplug from the wall your equipment, because if you just leave them on, this power is going away, is going on. So that habit of changing to say, okay, I will switch off from the floor. That habit of telling the woman there to say, plant a vegetable garden in your home, even if you are going to take a trough and cut it into 2 and put manure and then plant shoko, plant vegetable, plant, or even spices.
St. Francis Catholic Secondary School is becoming a green energy school.
As a visitor to St. Francis Catholic Secondary School in Idimu, you are welcomed with a message informing you that the school is a plastic-free environment and the administrators are working on running a fossil fuel-free learning environment.
So right now we have the capacity to generate 1,000 kilowatts of energy per day, but for now, because of funding, we're just able to store and use about 170 kilowatts of energy. We have over 500 solar panels on our roof, and we hope to build more. So for now, for our classroom systems, we have energy that can run the fans, the lighting system, the smart classrooms, you know, the projectors. In this building, this particular building, which is called the Loyola Jesuit Jubilee Building, built in honor of Pope Francis Laudato Si, and for quality and transformative education of children. The fans and the lights also run on solar energy. And while this building was being designed, we designed it in such a way that it was contextual in the context of our own system. So we we said, why is it for instance, by 12 p.m.? Why should we have to even depend on light, on NEPA, or even on generator? Why? So we have a transparent architecture. So it's more of like a glass walls, so that even now, like right now, there's no light, you can see me. And also we decided not to paint the building. So it looks like mud, like an African mud house. It's just basically brick building, so we don't need to paint, just for sustainability, so there's no need to paint. And we're doing it as a model, not just for ourselves, but hoping that it will be replicated elsewhere. Besides Pope Francis, the other inspiration to what we're doing here is actually the Provincial of the Northwest Africa Province of the Society of Jesus, Very Reverend Father Chuks Afiawari. He also threw the challenge, can we make this building an energy building for Lagos, so that others can imitate. So it's a big challenge on a very tall order, because we're like, oh my goodness, where are we going to get the fund? But we took the challenge, and by God's grace, we eventually were able to achieve it to an extent. And then we now went to other existing buildings and tried to do the same, try to model the same. Also, for the Chuks, the provincial also gave a challenge to all the Jesuit apostolates in Nigeria, and in fact in Northwest Africa. He told us that by the end of December 2018, he does not want to see plastics in the different apostolates in the country and in the province. So that was a big challenge. He threw that challenge like 3 months before the end of December 2018. We also began to say, okay, if we're not going to have plastics, what would be the alternative? And bingo, like an enlightenment, we say we have to quickly start thinking of introducing water flasks immediately. So we engaged, a company to start thinking of water flasks for the school, and we eventually got water flasks, with the logo of the school and the name of each person, each staff, each student, written on it. So this is mine. I still have mine, since that time. And so with that, we began to shift and say, okay, we are not going to have plastics any longer in this school.
Although much has been made of the issue of science versus religion, it seems that on one of the most important issues in our time, the issue of climate change, there's strong agreement about what is happening in the environment and what needs to be done to protect it.
We cannot have a concern for the environment unless we address the issue of consumerist capitalism, because we have told people that they ought to be able to have whatever they want, which creates tremendous dissatisfaction. We've also fed them this lie that if they could have everything they want, they'd be happy. Well, the most unhappy people I meet in the world are the very rich. I'd like to have some of their problems, but that is an issue. So I think we've got to, in terms of dealing with the environment, it's not just how do we preserve trees. It's not just how do we get the waters clean. It's not just how do we stop the plastics going into fish. It's about how do we understand why we are here. Because until we have a bigger picture of why we are here, we're just going to go on trying to take stuff to give ourselves a sense of security, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. So it calls for a fundamental change. It asks for us to go back often to ancient wisdoms that we are part of a community first and individual second, and that our communities are part of a bigger community of all life on Earth, and that humanity perhaps has to come second.
Only a few extinctions are attributed to climate change, reports the IPCC. But climate change that occurred much more slowly over millions of years caused major ecosystem shifts and species extinctions. Land and sea animals are changing their geographic ranges and migratory patterns due to climate change. The environmental movement includes many people who don't subscribe to any particular faith, as well as many others who do. Caring for birds, beasts, and the natural world is a common thread running through all the world's religions. Faith-based organizations have been recognized as key players in eradicating poverty, improving people's health, protecting the environment, and working towards sustainable development. So today, I leave you with this question. How well are you living the message of your spiritual belief regarding the environment? You've been watching Earthfile on Channels Television, and I'm Ayola Kasim, asking you to join us next week for another episode of the program. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.